to a really dynamic dialogue that questions issues of agency, of ethics, of power. The list goes on within the networked commons. And so I think this is the moment to open on to questions and begin a dialogue within the room on this focus of network cultures. I see a burning question in the back in the room.
Well, first of all, thank you to all the speakers for bringing together a really interesting body of work that raises a lot of curious questions. I'm going to start with an observation, which is that, sorry, I can't actually read the name of the presenters, but I think Annette's presentation included an image of a group of kind of women chained to a cake with like long, flowing blonde hair. And that's an image that I've seen printed and reprinted in the image exchange directory that Steve was discussing in his work, and which of course was in the period of the closed network. It was quite interested with these kind of hyper aestheticized versions of femininity from a gay male perspective. My question is, what's the origin of that picture? Because I've been trying to figure that out myself. But I'm also, I guess, making a link between the two different network cultures that you both have addressed in your presentations.
Well, I'm actually still in the process of discovering the origins of many of the images that I've shown, because I have found them on Tumblr, and it's a little bit iffy if for every single image's history to be recorded, because that archival process is dependent on users' adherence to Tumblr etiquette, which again is like the notes section for every post. But that doesn't necessarily mean they have to acknowledge or recognize where they took that post from, and that sort of brings people like us to a dead end, so to speak. And so it's still kind of a continual process, but one lead I did have, which this could be incorrect, I remember Lucille Ball, it replicated Lucille Ball, I believe, playing a slave girl in a film a while back. The name of the film escapes me, but again, that just sort of continued the process of replication of another image within another context. But I'm still in the process of figuring that out as well. And Steve wants to.
Sure, I think that's kind of an amazing anecdote or coincidence, maybe not though, because what we have is two very different, contextually very different, and in terms of the support system very different infrastructures that imagine themselves as a kind of network utopia. One in the 1960s was a kind of closed network, another one today that's functioning, and one queer masculine visions of femininity, the other one, queer and straight feminine hyper feminine visions of femininity. But what's interesting is that it does draw a connection between these kind of ideas of the network as a utopian space, or as a space where possibilities can happen for community building. I charted a kind of dissolution of that within a certain trajectory. What you're exposing is the way that it kind of crops up in outside of the line I draw, right? And so while I chart a certain kind of rise of network pessimism, say, or like the decline of network utopia within a certain intellectual discourse, another one forms in its path or whatever, out from it. So that's quite interesting. So thank you for that. Other questions?
Alice.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I have a question I think this one's for you, Steve. I was just intrigued, and it was really wonderful to listen to this sort of historical arc of these networked utopias that we're celebrating so much today as something that lives online. You know, it's through online social media, and I was intrigued, or rather, I was quite struck when you said that Anton Vidocco. Well, how a huge part of that project of eFlux is to expand that mailing list, right? Because in that you're able to also garner more clients, right? Who know that there is an audience there, and at the same time, I think Michael Morris, we were saying that, or at one point there was a interest in selling the artist directory for the Eternal Network, and how that was problematic for some of the members. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think there might be a bit of a misunderstanding, although there's another history. The Just Post file magazine exposure of the mail directory is something I cut from this paper that I delivered at CAA. You're right about the Anton Vidocco, but continue your.
Okay, well, no, I was just wondering in terms of where your study is going, if this is a continued project, if you're going to think about data mining and how these lists today are now, of course, corporations are trying to own these lists so that they can, just like Google, and it always has been in the hands of the military complex, if you will. But how that, whether eFlux would think about that as a way, as what they're doing as a counter practice to the data mining that is being corporatized, and actually, you know, it's all about financial gain, right?
Okay, I understand where you're going now. I cannot speak for eFlux. I'm not an employee. I've never even talked to Anton Vidocco, but I have heard many stories from his, like the surrounding circle. Anyway, so I'm not going to speak for him. I believe that the core members of eFlux, they're not, they're intelligent, they're well-read, and they're particularly savvy when it comes to understanding how the internet functions as an economic kind of engine. And I think, you know, the model that eFlux developed of basically commodifying listservs in the late 1990s, that was innovative, actually, specifically within the context of the distribution system of the art world. And it was actually kind of a genius model. They're taking little bits of money from every small Kunsthal in Europe and Asia, and some in North America, little bits, you know, $800 here and there, and making a probably, we don't know, but probably multi-million-dollar business that they can then throw back into eFlux projects and the production of discourse. And there's this sort of, the one thing that you can say about eFlux is they have this drive to disseminate new information. It's the novelty kind of drive. It's like, we need a new 10 essays on post-internet art or whatever every month. But coming back to your question, I don't think they believe this is a counter practice, an oppositional model by any means. I think that the eFlux engine, they see it as being an economic model, but as an economic model being a quite innovative one. Do you have anything to say?
Well, innovation mainly in like the sense that it's also used, like, you know, within the tech business sphere, which I think for certain constituents has definitely got a negative connotation though. Mm-hmm. You know, disruptive innovation, especially. But you know, I'm reminded of something that I think Ken Ward may have actually said himself, or that I read somewhere else on the subject of how network structures, despite, you know, their claims to horizontality, actually sort of tend towards monopolies, where you can see with the way that the internet has been commodified, like Google and Facebook have really just taken over. Like, it used to be you would get on the internet and surf around websites put up by anybody, and now I mean, I don't know about you guys, but mainly I access the internet through like large platforms that aggregate everything for me. And you can see how eFlux has done the same thing. But I wonder if maybe with the .art domain they've overstepped themselves, because I have a hard time seeing them pulling that off. It seems like we might look back on that as one of those like failed initiatives. I don't know if you know anything more about how that's developing. But.
It's stalled at the moment. The whatever the governing board that's basically going to sell the .art domain to either a venture capitalist firm or eFlux or DeviantArt. It hasn't been released yet. eFlux is like last on their list. It's not going to happen. But I think that there's a certain eFlux, or specifically Anton Vidocla, entertains a kind of megalomania in terms of public perception, and this is very much a posture as the artist hero. He's really he is attracted to the Russian avant-garde, which right? Yeah. And so I think that the .art domain, they wanted to succeed because it'd be a major money-making venture, of course. But I think there's also this idea of the artist-run organization as kind of ever-growing, like ever-expanding, but not. I don't think. The public image would be that it would form a kind of monopolizing thing, but I don't think that would actually be the case. You know, eFlux has a lot of power, symbolic and infrastructural power, but I don't think right now it has the potential to monopolize in that way.
Well, I mean, they've monopolized the listserv game anyway, but
sure,
yeah.
Do we have
Yeah, I have a question for Saelan. That was really interesting. I was wondering if you could expand on something for me. I was really struck by, your reflection on kind of something you mentioned early on about kind of the failure of maybe image theory to account for what has happened today. It kind of, I guess, like the dark postmodern theories of what was going to happen didn't quite come true, that sort of reflection that you had. And the artists that you were talking about, they're kind of like postmodern take on ecology, as being very much almost, this part of a artificial world that exists around us that is available for us to consume and recreate and comment on. I was wondering if you could just reflect on that for me a little bit more. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I'm not totally sure where to start answering that question.
Fair enough. Just go wherever.
But I mean, I think for the artists I'm talking about, they wouldn't consider their ecology to be a postmodern one, which is sort of a whole other kettle of fish that I don't know if I really want to open up. What is not postmodern in theory. But I think the issue with their issue with postmodern theory as they understand it. And some of these issues I think are legitimate, is that when your focus is exclusively on, because in a lot of respects, postmodern theory is quite idealist, though I don't think necessarily all of its proponents would cop to that. But social constructivism in general holds that everything is in the mind. Everything is mediated through language. It's all like abstract relationships that for extreme postmodernists, the sort of caricature, like reality doesn't even exist. It's all just a construction of language. And so that's really what's being rejected. But also I think along with that, I mean, insofar as like a leftist version of new materialism goes, the issue with postmodern ideology critique, and I mean, which you could extend to critical art in general, is that when you're deconstructing belief systems to show, that this is constructed in this way to benefit someone else, or the way that power relations are installed in gender or something, you expose this on a sort of communicative level, but the best you can hope for is maybe that you change someone's belief. And I think there's sort of a question of, like, at this point, critical theory has been established in the academy for like 30, 40 years, and this is the exact same period of the role of neoliberalism worldwide. And so there's a real question of whether this particular kind of leftist critique has been effective in any way. and whether we need to find something that actually addresses more material circumstances rather than just what we think about them.
I mean, do you think these artists feel that what they're doing is that response?
Mainly,
Or
no.
No, okay.
No, because there's sort of like accelerationism is one of has both leftist and non-leftist variants, and I think that these guys are, if anything, sort of the non-leftist variant. But there are other variants that I didn't discuss. These are just sort of the most extreme cases, which I think are the most provocative.
Yeah, I was just struck by like the artificiality of their response to the natural world.
Yeah, I mean, like for Katja Novitzkova, she just absolutely believes that like it's all within evolution everything bounces back. That like for her, like she also
which is the typical like right-wing response to climate change.
Yeah, but I'm also not entirely sure whether she really cares if humanity goes extinct.
Or
it's
the
like,
rest of nature.
Well, the rest of nature, it'll keep existing. It might just be like absolutely nothing we recognize. And I mean, on that ground, maybe she's right, but that's pretty apocalyptic.
Right.
It worries me. It just doesn't seem to worry.
Fair enough. Okay. Thank you.
Did I see other questions out there? Yes.
Hi. Thanks everyone for your presentations. I have a question for Annette, actually. So cool to see you use the essay I co-authored. I'm glad it's still of use. I was just thinking about, you mentioned the male and female gaze in relation to the bodies of the teen girl Tumblr aesthetic, and I was just wondering about the gendering of the gaze and sort of how you arrived at that. And then also like the end of your presentation with the like performativity of like the bestie friend relationship. I was wondering if you feel like there is an opportunity for like genuine relationships and friendships on Tumblr, like if you've talked to people who have done that successfully, or I don't know, because I'm sort of, I mean, I did co-author the essay, but I'm sort of torn myself on if there is a space on Tumblr for authenticity.
Well, in reference to the male and female gaze, male gaze I took from film theory, of course, so I was going with that concept, but I think the female gaze is something that's still in flux and dependent on the observers, to an extent, their sexuality as well, who they're gazing at, how they're dissecting or objectifying that person, in a sense like what's desired, what do they want, or what are they searching for, in a sense. And so those were the two which I'll expand upon in future iterations of my research. But in questioning authenticity, I'm still actually torn about that as well, because I don't know if Tumblr provides a space where anyone can reach an agreement with authenticity, if that divide between performance and what identity one is trying on, if that can ever be bridged. And I think it does go towards something that's changed within Butler's idea of performativity. What's happening on Tumblr is so quick and so fast that it almost can't be quantified, it can't be archived in some way. And because it's all about user adherence as well, and it's just so quick, and so I might be a little pessimistic as far as that's concerned. But again, I think that could extend to different social media sites as well. Like that Facebook profile, that was actually my fake profile that has over 1,500 friends. I know none of them, and I mean, I use it purely for antisocial purposes. So I am a bit pessimistic about if a space can ever be reached for authenticity, but I don't doubt that some are able to bridge that gap.
Yeah, that's interesting. In the follow-up essay I wrote, which is more focused, it's mostly focused on bodies of queer women of color, there is a move toward, I love a lot of these connections and it is a safe space, I just wish they could exist offline too.
Most definitely.
Do we have a final question out there? Yes.
Just a quick comment, like, is it possible, throwing it out there as Tabby Gevinson's cross-country, like connecting with her Tumblr followers tour that was funded by Urban Outfitters in the summer of 2012 as a possible physical manifestation of this culture in all of its aesthetics.
I will say in response to that, well, part of me absolutely loves that, and again, goes back to that idea of a fangirl archetype. Like if you read Rookie magazine and you meet and someone like Tabby, like the letter to the editor every month, it makes you feel like you know her, that you're friends with her. But at the end of the day, how much do you really know Tabby? I mean, she's being paid by Urban Outfitters to go across the country and pretend like she's your friend. Does Tabby really care? Maybe, maybe not. I'd like to think that she does, but at the end of the day, again, it's that space that you don't know if it can be bridged.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's great.
Okay. And then, maybe we'll take one last question and then we'll wrap up. I see.
I just wanted to ask Annette about the difference between I didn't quite understand that, the difference between the girl, G-U-R-L, and G-I-R-L. What's the difference?
So, IRL is also an acronym for in real life that many internet users use, referring to their identities off the net, and URL, of course, refers to specific website zones in cyberspace. And in my take, the girl, the GURL, is an identity to a certain extent, and I'm still sort of tackling this, that can be performed by many people, not just ones who identify as feminine in real life, but on the net you can put on that experience. And usually it can be younger users, queer, people of color, people on the margins in real life who have experienced oppression in one form or another. And this does tread a thin line for me between being gender essentialist and if there is anything very particular about such an experience. And in Takan's Theories for a Young Girl, I'm still a bit on the fence about that work as well, about what it means to be a girl in real life and a girl on the net. Can anyone do this? And just what does it mean to have a gendered experience, and what is specific to our experience growing up?
Thanks.
My great appreciation to the three panelists. At this point in time, we'll take a 1-hour lunch break, and I believe at 2 p.m. conference resumes.